Violence erupting, and today we continue to follow the unrest in Brazil. At least 400 people have been arrested after supporters of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro stormed these major federal buildings yesterday. There is a lot of aftermath and cleanup inside some of the government building, as you can see from this video here on your screen. The riot comes about a week after the inauguration of leftist President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who defeated Bolsonaro in a runoff election. Our senior correspondent John Huddy has been following the latest on this unrest. John, being reported now at least 12 journalists were also attacked with all of this, underscoring really how violent things turned in a matter of minutes. What else can you tell us?
Yeah, and of those 12 journalists, several had their gear stolen. We're talking about cameras, tripods, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it was a violent ordeal. And as you mentioned, at least 400 people have been arrested, 1,200 detained at this point, Bianca, and that number continues to go up, according to Brazilian officials who say that security forces have retaken control of the country's government buildings in Brasilia, also bringing up a camp of protesters that were basically camped out near those buildings, while the country's president, Luiz Lula da Silva, said last night that work would resume today at the presidential palace, along with, obviously, the cleanup. This after, as we've been talking about, thousands of supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro saying the election was stolen, stormed the government building Sunday in protest of President Lula taking office. As you can see there, some of the video, they vandalized, among other things, the congressional building, the Supreme Court, and the presidential palace. Now, President Lula vowed to capture and punish all of those involved, describing the violence as quote-unquote barbaric, and said that a lack of security allowed Bolsonaro's, he said, fascist supporters to breach the security barricades and ultimately security forces. There's been a lot of international reaction, as you can imagine, including from President Biden, who tweeted, quote, "I condemn the assault on democracy and on the peaceful transfer of power in Brazil. Brazil's democratic institutions have our full support, and the will of the Brazilian people must not be undermined. I look forward to continuing to work with @Lula official." He's referring to the president's official Twitter account. Other world leaders also denouncing the violence in Brazil, including UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who also tweeted, "I condemn today's assault on Brazil's democratic institutions." He posted this yesterday. "The will of the Brazilian people and the country's institutions must be respected. I am confident that it will be so. Brazil is a great democratic country." Meanwhile, former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro responded to the violence, writing on Twitter, "Peaceful demonstrations in the form of law," and I'm translating here, "are part of democracy. However, depredations and invasions of public buildings as occurred today, as well as those practiced by the left in 2013 and 2017, escaped the rule." He's referring to protests against tax hikes, police brutality, that kind of thing, back in 2013 and 2017. Bolsonaro, by the way, Bianca, has been here in Florida, staying at a resort community near Disney World, and we're getting some reports that he was taken to the hospital today with some stomach pain, stomach discomfort. So we're continuing to follow that, along with what's been happening in Brazil. Back to you.
Senior correspondent John Huddy with the very latest. John, thank you.